This is Radio X.
From Global. What a life. Noel Gallagher at 50. Radio
X.
This is Radio X. I'm John Kennedy, and in the studio with me is Noel Gallagher. Hello, Noel.
Hello.
It's good to see you.
Thank you very much. You too.
So we're here today, Noel, because you've come into Radio X to make a programme celebrating your 50th birthday. But before that, I thought it would be a good idea to talk about the tragic events in Manchester on Monday, your hometown, of course.
Yeah.
So what was your reaction?
Put on the radio and, of course, you hear what's happened and, you know, it takes a while. It took a while for it. You're kind of sat up in bed, kind of, you know, it's like 7 o'clock in the morning and you're thinking, you know, you're kind of speechless. Not the, you know, and having played that arena and all that and stood in that foyer and, you know, and being from Manchester, and as it's dawning on you that, you know, it's aimed at young music fans. There's not many, you know, I say that, you know, there are no words. There are words. Unfortunately, you can't broadcast the words. But yeah, you know, I mean, I suppose Manchester Arena will open again, and yeah, you have to keep going, you know. I mean, I don't know what Ariana Grande's going to do. I couldn't imagine.
Do you feel for her? You know,
well, I on her, I don't know what I would feel or how I would react. You just don't know. I mean, I'm pretty upset about it now, but if it was your fans, you know, wow, it'd be just, you know. But, you know, I've got a teenage daughter. In another life, she, you know, I had a teenage daughter in Manchester, you know. She may well have been there. You know, the first thing you do when you get up, I'm kind of texting my friends in Manchester. And bar a couple of friends who are in hospital, and two very close shaves, all the people that I know didn't get involved in it or weren't caught up in it. And it's lucky in that sense, but, you know, I think this particular atrocity will take quite a while to heal.
Well, whilst we reflect on the terrible news, you're here to also reflect on your past 50 years as it's your birthday. This is What a Life, Noel at 50 here on Radio X. It is Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds on Radio X. I'm John Kennedy, a.k.a. What a Life, Noel at 50. I'm very pleased to say that Noel Gallagher himself is here at Radio X to celebrate your 50th birthday, Noel. Happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
I mean, it's amazing. I love the way that you are seemingly embracing your 50th. I'm assuming you are, because you're coming in to talk to me about it.
Yeah. I'm actually celebrating the end of my 40s, which has been the best decade I've ever had in my entire life. And if you think about what went before that, the last 10 years, on a personal level, I mean, on a professional level, I guess the 20s and 30s would be supersede that. But on a personal level, I've had insanely brilliant times and beautiful family life and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I am embracing the big 5-0. I think you have to, don't you?
You don't have to. Many people.
Well, no, women don't. Like my missus is throwing me. In fact, as you're listening to this, we'll still be going for it somewhere. She's throwing me a party, and it dawned on me as this party was getting bigger and bigger that she's throwing it for herself, really, because women, they'll never. I don't even know how old my wife is. I have no idea. I think she's 40 something. So she's having the 50th that she will never admit that she's ever even approaching. It's kind of a joint 50th, although she's nowhere near 50 yet, and she'll never acknowledge that she is. But I think fellas get better with age.
Yeah.
I think you get better with age.
Yeah, we tell ourselves that.
I think it's true. Well, I think it's true. Maybe it's just the chosen few that get that.
So in this show, we're celebrating your 50th birthday by playing tracks from across the 10 albums that you've released. I mean, we're saying it's 10. I mean, it could be 11, could be 12, including live albums. But we will discuss this as we go along. But it seemed like the natural place to start with was with the opening track to the debut album, Rock and Roll Star. This is Radio X. I'm John Kennedy and I'm with Noel Gallagher for What a Life. Noel at 50. A look at your career to this point. What better way to truly begin than with Rock and Roll Star?
I've said it many times, it sums up Oasis. If push comes to shove, I said everything I ever wanted to say in that song. I often wonder what it must have been like to be, say, 15 and be like a fan of music and to buy that record and put that on and to hear that, you know, for the first time. Because in before the age of social media, you would know that song off by heart because you could have seen it on YouTube 40 or 50 times before the record come out. But it's a great tune, and the end, you know, and the ending was an improvised ending. I think in rehearsals one night we set the bar pretty high with that record, but then with that track as well, it was kind of like, wow, you know. I guess if push comes to shove, it'd be in every Oasis fan's top 5, I would imagine.
Yeah. And so the interesting thing to me is that maybe with the album, it's almost all those dreams that you had, possibly from when you first picked up a guitar or maybe before that those dreams of being a rock and roll star, now you are 50. You know, has it lived up to any expectations you might have had on your bedroom, on your bed, lying on your bed in Burnage? Absolutely,
by far. It's exceeded everything I ever thought it would. When we first started playing that song, you know, we weren't playing to many people at all, just into double figures, you know. You know, Liam would be singing "Tonight I'm a Rock and Roll Star" in an empty club, and the barman would be thinking, "Sure, okay, whatever." But rock stardom, yeah, there's many levels to it. I live a rock star life. I'm not sure I'm a rock star. Liam's a rock star. People like that are rock stars. There's lots of us who live the life, but we're not really rock stars. More grafters, you know what I mean? But to answer the question, it's better than I thought it would be, and it's easier than I thought it was going to be.
Really?
Yeah. When things are going great, and you're writing great songs, and everything's, you know, just one thing after another, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. That's easy. When things start to take a dip, and you're going through peaks and troughs, I've never really panicked in the troughs and never really got too excited about the peaks. You know, you accept that you can't be great all the time. You know, you can just be as good as you are, you know, whenever the mood takes you, you know. But I've loved it. I've absolutely loved it. And maybe it's because I seen the other side of it when I was a roadie for a few years and I was off stage as opposed to on stage. Maybe I appreciated it a little more when I got it. And maybe it's because I was the sole writer, that I was kind of directing it. I thought it must have been a bit strange for the other lads in the band. You know, imagine walking into Rockfield to record Morning Glory and never even hearing any of the songs because we didn't do demos, you know, and then hearing Champagne Supernova for the first time. I know what it was like when I played it back to myself for the first time and I thought, ooh, I better get a driver's licence. I still haven't got, by the way. I better get a pilot's licence. Wonder what it was like for Bonehead and Liam and Griggs to kind of seeing it all kind of wow, you know. But yeah, I found it quite an easy thing to do, really.
Radio X.
What a life. Noel Gallagher at 50.
So life as a new rock and roll star was something that you slipped into quite easily. I mean, I guess you had a little glimpse of it by being a roadie and being part of the Inspiral Carpet scene and having gone to loads and loads of gigs, which you did as a teenager. And then, you know, roll with it from What's the Story, Morning Glory. I mean, did you feel that you were just rolling with it, rolling with that success, rolling with... It's not.
You know, there was a period from the day that I wrote Live Forever, which would have been sometime in 93, all the way through 93, 94, 95, 96. So it's about 3 years. Every single thing that I wrote, every song for 3 years has become more famous than me, more famous than the person that wrote it. I kind of knew it wasn't going to last. I know enough about music and the songwriting and the songwriters and reading magazines and interviews and books to know that it can't last forever. And I was determined to enjoy it. That particular song itself It's not Great Shakes as a song, you know. But it's one of those songs where the crowd would go berserk instantly. It's very instant. You know, the thing about most of Oasis's music, particularly the first 3 albums, actually not Definitely Maybe, which sounds great. The other two, they sound pretty appalling on the record, but that's because we were having such a great time in the studio that it was like, yeah, we'll worry about the bass later. You know, still should meaning to fix the bass on Morning Glory at some point. But it was they were that particular time round roll with it was great. You know, people forget. Let's bring it into sharp contrast now with what's going on up in Manchester, or what's been going on in Manchester the last few weeks. How amazing the 90s was. And I felt it at the time. And not only because we were happening and it was happening, but, you know, fashion, music, politics, sport, everything in our, not high culture, like, but even art, you know, Damien Hirst and all that kind of thing, but in the working class culture was world class, you know. And I felt it at the time. And the highbrow people used to scoff about the 90s at the time. Well, it's hardly the 60s or the 70s. I remember somebody writing it's hardly the 60s, 70s or the 80s, you know, but if we look back on it now, it was an amazing time, you know. It was an amazing time to be young, and particularly in the music business where, you know, you got out of bed and sold 1 million records at one point. You know, unbelievable.
Coming up.
It is incredible to think that a few generations now have attached some kind of importance to that song.
Radio X. What a life. Noel Gallagher at 50. Radio X. What a life. Noel Gallagher at 50.
A change, at least critically, seemed to come for Oasis with Wonderwall and Don't Look Back in Anger, I think. I mean, once you wrote those songs and those songs were out there in the world, it was almost as if people thought, hang on a minute, we need to take this a bit more seriously. We need to take Noel Gallagher a bit more seriously.
Yeah, well, it's a good job I wasn't thinking that way.
Right.
I do remember two people from Creation coming down to listen to, we were halfway through making Morning Glory, might have been towards the end. Alan McGee was in rehab, and Dick Green, Andy Saunders, I think, came down and they played Roll With It and Hello and Morning Glory, and it was all nodding. And then Wonderwall came on, and I'll never forget, they both kind of looked at each other, and if they didn't have pound signs in their eyes, it was kind of like the eyes were like jackpot machines. You know. Yeah, Don't Look Back in Anger as well. I mean, I've said to you on a couple of occasions doing interviews, it's like if I'd have known as a songwriter then what was going to become of those songs, you'd never have finished them. You know, it's a good job that I didn't have a clue what was going to happen. I thought it was a good album at the time. I thought, yeah, it'll do. You know, we play it at Glastonbury, you know, because we were due to headline it when we came to say, yeah, it'll be all right. And you'd never finish it if you would have the foresight of how popular those songs became. But yeah, it did take it to another level, particularly in America. Those were the two songs that kind of, that and Champagne Supernova, that smashed it in America for us. Well, that's a whole another tale of nonsense.
And with Don't Look Back in Anger, singing that, did that make a big difference to you? Kind of singing the song and getting that song recognised and admired and loved? Not
at the time. Honestly, as the years have gone by, it's like that song is now more important than I'll ever be. There's footage on the internet now of people singing it in Manchester, candles and all that, and it is incredible to think that a few generations now have attached some kind of importance to that song. There was Mine. You know, if you remember back at the time, there was this TV series called Our Friends Up North, or Friends Up North or something. And right at the end, when they'd all kind of grown old and they were all in their 50s, you know, but none of them looked like me, I've got to say. They played Don't Look Back in Anger, and that was what it meant to our generation, and England getting knocked out of the Euros and what have you. Then it was passed on to another generation, and that song now has become a hymn to something or other. You know, I still play it. I play it acoustically to 100 competition winners, or I play it to 70,000 people at a festival. It still works. There's not many songs you can say that about. I certainly can't say that about all my songs. You know? And you do sit there sometimes and think, you know, I'd probably only have to introduce it and play the first chord. I could probably walk off then and nobody'd notice. You know, because there's just people with their eyes shut, you know, crying and stuff, and it's like it's an amazing thing. You know, it's something it's something I never kind of take for granted either. You know,
does it make you feel humbled? Can Noel Gallagher feel humbled? Or does it just move you?
There's two parts to that question. Yeah. Does it make me... Do I ever feel humbled? No. Does it make me feel humble? It makes me feel... Is it proud, the word I'm looking for? I don't ever sit there and think, no, I wrote that. I think it came from somewhere else. I think it was a song that was there somewhere, and if I hadn't have written it, Bono would have wrote it. You know, it's like those great songs, One and Let It Be, and like, yeah, I did just compare myself to Paul McCartney there for a second. They're there. If they fall out of the sky and land on your lap, then lucky you. You know, doesn't make, because I wrote that song, doesn't make me any greater a person than, I was going to burn a few names there, and I was thinking, but it does make me a better person than they are. But it doesn't make me any better a person, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or a songwriter.
Yeah.
I caught it, you know, on a good day, you know.
You got lucky.
Extremely.
It is Radio X. I'm John Kennedy. We are celebrating Noel Gallagher's 50th birthday. What a life. Noel at 50. Do you know what I mean? Be Here Now, the third Oasis album. And sometimes that seems to get a bad press from you, Noel. Be Here Now. Regardless of what other people think about it. But when I hear Do You Know What I Mean, I love that song because it just seems, I love the idea of it being a celebration of everybody together, everybody you love together at one point, all singing along to the same thing. And that, whether I'm on my own listening to it or with other people, that's what I think.
That was the peak of Oasis. That moment when Do You Know What I Mean was released, before the album was released. It never got any more important, intense, bigger, better than that. And it does get bad press by me because I know what little effort I put into writing that album. And everybody that was in the studio did their bit manfully and were great, blah, blah, blah. I wrote that on holiday in the, I don't know where I was, in the Bahamas or something. And again, if I'd have known what that album was, what people were expecting, I'd still be writing it now. I have got, thankfully, a healthy dose of, you know what, put it out. I don't really sit and banny around for months, you know, because I think this is important and it must sound perfect. It is what it is, you know. I even hate that term for me saying it. I must apologise to my wife for saying that. But I was asked to somebody from a record label who said, oh, you're always banging on about Be Here Now, why don't you go and remix it, re-edit it or something? I think the songs are too long, and I thought, well, go on then, yeah. So I went in the studio and got the masters. So I said, right, let's do it in sequence, you know, and started with Do You Know What I Mean, which I remixed and it sounds great. I love it now. There was lots of distortion and chaos on that song. But as we went through the tracks, I was listening to it and thinking, you know what? It's just taken away. It's meant to be that insanely long. They're all meant to have 2-minute intros before the singing comes in. You know, they're all meant to have 2 guitar solos in each song. And the lyrics are meant to be nonsense. I think I started to edit it and fanny around with it, and then I had a moment of clarity in the studio and said, you know what, leave it. It's just leave it. I'll be diluting it here, and I wouldn't like future generations to get attached to a version of that album when they should all. It's like when, you know, Let It Be was remixed or whatever it was. It was just like, come on, man, leave it, let it be. So I'd like, it's part of the story. You know, it's part of the story. So I left it, but do you know what I mean? I love it. I love the remix that I did for it. I think it's miles better than the record. It turns out we were looking for all the track sheets, and we've got this mixing desk. We got all the tracks on the mixing desk, and the London. If it wasn't the London Philharmonic Orchestra, then it was some London orchestra. Got to be 100 of them, all going through a tiny Vox amp in the so all mic'd up, and then that fed into an amp, and that was the string sound. I was laughing, thinking, what? The mindset now is beyond me to think that was, you know, sitting there smoking indoors when you're smoking inside. Stick it for a Vox amp, see what it sounds like. It's amazing, you know. Only someone in their 20s could smoking 20 a day and drinking in the studio could even come up with that concept and kind of sell it. But I wouldn't do it now.
Still to come.
This is I'm either going to have to leave the planet Earth and go and live on Mars because it's going to get so big, or we're just going to be another band after this.
Radio X. What a life. Noel Gallagher at 50.
Go Let It Out from Oasis, Standing on the Shoulder of Giants. And did you critique yourself at the time? So did you then approach the next album in a different way? So when we heard Standing on the Shoulder of Giants, had you kind of thought about Be Here Now and thought, well, no, I to myself think I phoned that in. I'm going to do things differently this time.
Well, I must say, and you can go and check this, before that album came out, I did an interview where I said, when I played it to people, like people at the American record company, I thought it was all right, Be Here Now. I thought it was all right. I thought, you're never going to follow up this Morning Glory. It's like, again, I know enough about rock history to know you don't get two of those in a row, When I played it, people at the record label and Sony and Epic, they were saying, you leave yourself 20 million of these, and I was going, can it be that easy that you sit there in shorts, sweating, trying to get something to rhyme with whatever nonsensical line you've come up with before? It can't be that easy, because if it's that easy, then I'm not going to be alive very much longer, you know what I mean? I'll drive myself mental. And I did an interview where I said I wasn't sure about the record, but I was sure about one thing. I'm either going to have to leave the planet Earth and go and live on Mars because it's going to get so big, or we're just going to be another band after this, just another group. And I was proved right. I remember Liam being very upset at the time of that interview. What are you not for? And I was like, because that's what I feel. I feel like we're either going to be bigger than Jesus, or it's going to be just, this is it. So when it came to Standing on the Shoulder of Giants, what happens every 3 or 4 albums in, you start to just think, well, I'll do that now, Even if you're still writing the same style of music, it's like, let's see anyone else got any ideas? And I've always worked in the way that if I meet a guy at a bus stop who tells me a producer, I'll think it's fate that I've met him at a bus stop, and I'll say, wait, he could produce this next album for us. And I met Spike Stent through U2. We had a drink, and therefore I thought that it was fate that he was going to produce this album, and then he did. So it probably wasn't the best idea, And we convinced somebody to let us hire Christian Dior's mansion in the south of France and all drive there and stay there for 3 months while the Cannes Film Festival was on. And somebody thought that was a good idea. I think I initially thought it was a good idea, thinking someone would say, "I'm not paying for that." You think you are? After, Be Here Now was a 9 million flop, which always used to amuse me. And they let us do it. And we went down there and had a whale of a time. Unfortunately, for me, my inspiration had deserted me and didn't really come back for a while. I did it. I'd done it. The money had started coming in from the 2 big albums, and it's like, he wants to go work. Okay, I'll go for in the south of France. Okay. And I was, I had a bit of a low ebb of looking around for inspiration. And of course, the Chemical Brothers at the time were great, and the electronic music was great. But I can't do that, you know what I mean? I sit and strum an acoustic guitar and wait for stuff to fall out of the sky. And fortunately, it was falling out of the sky, but it was going past me and landing in Richard Ashcroft's lap. And, soon to be Chris Martin's lap. Yeah, the wind was blowing it in their direction and not mine, unfortunately.
But Go Let It Out.
Go Let It Out's great.
That's a great track.
Yeah,
where did it all go wrong? Does that song sum up some of these things for you?
But everybody wanted me to change the album was going to be called that. I thought it'd be a great title for an album, and I got talked out of that. And they being the people at the record label and in the band, said, "Oh, don't have a track called Where Did It All Go Wrong?" And I was like, well, I love that, because, it isn't happening. You might as well acknowledge it. But Go Let It Out is brilliant. I love the sound of that. Ironically, I think some of the best words I ever wrote was on Standing on the Shoulder of Giants. The words to Gas Panic, really heavy, kind of, dark poetry. Where Did It All Go Wrong is brilliant. If I'm thinking of the words now, we're kind of summing up the people that were hanging out at my house, you know what I mean, in Primrose Hill, and the parties and all that. And they're great lyrics. And there's a song on which ends up being on the B-side for some reason called Let's All Make Believe, which has got great words to it. So in some respects I was doing good work, but I was finding it difficult to marry it to the tunes.
Coming up.
The best thing was the sound check. We were brilliant in the sound check. I had to stop the sound check halfway through because we were that good. It was like, let's not leave it here in an empty stadium.
Radio X. What a life. Noel Gallagher at 50.
You're listening to Radio X. I'm John Kennedy. What a life. Noel at 50. We are celebrating Noel Gallagher's 50th birthday, and it's hard to work out just which records we should include. Obviously, there are 7 Oasis albums. You've got the 2 solo albums with the High Flying Birds, but the 10th album is a live album, familiar to millions. Oasis live at Wembley. And one of the things that is interesting, Acquiesce is on there, and that's not on the other albums. Obviously it's on the compilation that came out later, but one of your greatest songs and a live staple. And also we were talking about Standing the Shoulder Giants. You did an 8-minute version of Gas Panic at Wembley, which is interesting. And the live thing. So we got King Tut's a pivotal moment in the Oasis live career, the night you get signed. Then there's Main Road, there's Nebworth, there's Wembley Stadium. How do you view all those pinnacles? Which is the pinnacle? Which is that has the most fond memories for you?
Well, they're all at the top of a mountain range.
The Andes.
Yeah, they're kind of the
Himalayas of rock.
Yeah. King Tut's will be forever the mythical, magical night that is actually true, that people still don't believe is true. The fact that footage ended up of that gig on some DVD blew my mind at the time. Main Road, the one before that was Sheffield Arena. It was the first arena we'd ever played. It could have been the night, some might say we did Top of the Pops the day before or the night after, I can't remember. And that was like arena, 12,000 people. I remember saying to the promoter, are you sure about this? And he was saying you could do 6 nights if you want. I was like, what? Main Road, when the documentary came out, the recent Supersonic documentary, and we were having a meeting, there's a few of us around a table in a boardroom somewhere, and the guy who's directing it is turning over sheets of paper on a clipboard, and when we propose to tell the story of the 2.5 years from when you signed off to going on stage at Nebworth, and I'm nodding going, what was that? 2.5 years? That blew my mind. So it would mean that it was less than that from signing off to walking out on stage at Main Road. It's like 18 months or something. In any era, that's insane. I've had parties that have gone on for like 18 months. Far less did what we did. And when the lad was saying, it's 2.5 years, I went back and checked it and was thinking, my God, that is unbelievable. Like tours now are 2.5 years. And to say that in those 2.5 years you would write, record, do those tours for Morning Glory and Definitely Maybe, and still, not end up anywhere near rehab is mental. It's insane. So if we can get to Wembley Stadium and that particular album, it's a disgrace, that album. It's offensive. I was in a shop recently in Japan, and usually what happens in shops in Japan is if I walk in, somebody will put on a Oasis, They Usually Live Forever or Wonderwall. For some reason, this psychedelic madman decides to put on Familiar to Millions, and I'm kind of flicking through whatever it was, T-shirts or jeans, and I'm thinking, what is that racket? That's awful. And it was that album. The whole weekend was just a nightmare. The best thing about that weekend is captured slightly on, some guy did a film of it that's on some DVD somewhere. The best thing was the sound check. We were brilliant in the sound check. I had to stop the sound check halfway through because we were that good. It was like, let's not leave it here in an empty stadium. Our soundman went ballistic. It's like, we're playing too well, you know what I mean? We can't leave it all here. There is a mix of it that's just the band, and it's the stadium's mic'd up, so it's just the crowd and the band singing, which is my favourite mix. Liam, unfortunately, can hang his head in shame. It was like the live broadcast is just, I don't know what it is. I wouldn't even know how to sum it up. It's just, it was a horrible 2.5 hours on that stage or whatever it was. It was dreadful. It's the low point for me in the Oasis years. I was having a terrible time in personal life. The cover's not bad though. Give you that.
The fifth album in your career, Noel, as we look back, Heathen Chemistry, and then obviously Don't Believe the Truth as well. And so, I mean, what do you think about those records entering into a new era of Oasis, really?
Well, they were great in the sense that Gem and Andy had joined. Griggs and Bonehead had left during Standing on the Shoulder of Giants, and I didn't feel the band was going to go on much longer after that Wembley Stadium shambles. It must have been either Gem or Andy. I remember one of them saying, "Yeah, don't stop now, let's just make a record." And the three of us were looking at each other, and I was thinking, Andy's a brilliant musician, so is Gem, and I love him dearly, you know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, let's do it, you know. It then became addictive being in the studio with them because they're so... I hadn't experienced it before, being with musicians like that, who you respected. Not that I didn't respect Bonehead and Griggs and any of that, but, you know, they were kind of like, they were pop stars, albeit indie pop stars in their own right. And Heathen Chemistry, yeah, we produced it ourselves in our own studio. And it was great. It's an album that needed to be made. It's noteworthy for Songbird, because it was Liam's first, maybe one and only great song. It got us going in another direction. Not musically, we didn't go space jazz or anything. From my own point of view, it certainly reinvigorated my enthusiasm to carry it on. And if we hadn't have got that, we wouldn't have got Don't Believe the Truth, which is a great album.
Yeah. But, I mean, with Heathen Chemistry, you had Little by Little and She Is Love, two songs that were released as a single and went to number one, with you singing both of those songs, which is another suggestion that you could do this on your own.
Yeah, well, I'd already, don't look back in anger kind of...
Yeah.
Kick that particular door down. But yeah, Little by Little, that's right. I didn't think a great deal of the song. I don't think a great deal of the recording of it. It's deathly slow. When we played it live, it was always much better. It was only when I went solo that on the first solo tour that I did, I'd got a backing band then, and we were going through Oasis songs to do, and of course you're pulling out all the big ones and thinking, I'm not going to be able to sing that, I can't sing that. And I thought, I'll ask these guys, what do you fancy doing? And they all went, that song Little by Little. And I was like, really? And we played it and it was brilliant. And then playing it at the gigs, people went mental for it. It is a great song. She Is Love, never been performed live. Maybe the first proper love song I've ever written about my then girlfriend, now wife.
You ever going to play it live?
I might play it on the next tour, actually. I sing it at home from time to time, not to Sarah, but I sing it from time to time and think, I'll probably do a version of that. But I'm trying to think of what else is on that record. The Hindu Times is on that record. I mean, they were all great to play live, I think, those songs. The Hindu Times. I've got happy memories of that period in that studio up in Wickham, wherever it was. Yeah, good times, as they say.
Still to come.
And going back to that point, I was willing to let it go. One of the great things, I've never asked advice off anyone for anything, but Paul Weller offered me advice once in the 90s.
Radio X.
What a Life. Noel Gallagher at 50.
And Don't Believe the Truth. I mean, more number ones came with Don't Believe the Truth. I mean, Lila was number one.
Yeah.
The Importance of Being Idle was number one as well. Again, with you singing it.
Let There Be Love was number one, I believe.
At number two, actually.
It's great. It was number one in our eyes.
But it did have you and Liam singing together.
Yeah, well, Don't Believe the Truth was the first time we'd recorded in America. We went off to Capitol Studios, and we were kind of... When I'm in LA, from time to time, you'll kind of see bands, and they're like on their second album, and you're going, what are you doing in town? Like, we're recording at Sunset Sound. You're like, how many records have you made? And like, this is our second album. I think, wow, it took us years to even consider going to America. And then these idiots I'm like, well, we need to record in America, and he's just like, wow, you'll be dropped within 6 months. Going into work every morning to Capitol Studios was, you're walking down this corridor and it's all the pictures of all the people that have recorded there, and Nat King Cole's piano and Frank Sinatra's microphone, and it's just like, wow, this is it. You're living the dream here. And Zach Starkey had just joined us. And again, he gave the rhythm section a new lease of life. Brilliant stories. And the songs, it was coming back. When I said before, the inspiration had deserted me. And going back to that point, I was willing to let it go. One of the great things, I've never asked advice off anyone for anything, but Paul Weller offered me advice once in the 90s, because he suffered the same thing before Wildwood and his renaissance. He said to me, if it goes away, don't chase it, because if you chase it, you'll never get it. You've got to wait for it to come back. And for some reason, I don't take advice off people well at all. And give it. I'm pretty good at giving it. I'm terrible at taking it. But for some reason, that stuck with me, and it felt like it might be a truism. And it's turned out to be one of the ultimate truisms of songwriting. So when it went away, I didn't chase it. And when it started to come back, Lila and The Importance of Being Idle and Part of the Queue and Mucky Fingers, I recognised it. And I latched onto it, and me, Andy and Gen rallied round it almost, you know what I mean? And the conversations about music got better. The drinking got heavier, but it was good. It wasn't dark at all. It's brilliant. The gigs got bigger. Instead of doing like Wembley Stadium, we were doing 3 nights at Wembley Stadium, and then we were doing 3 nights at the Etihad, and we'd be doing multiple nights at stadium. So we felt that like a new generation had got onto it. It was a second lease of life for the band, and we were good, man. And we played those gigs. We were brilliant. So they were great nights, and the nights at the Etihad were unbelievable. They were unbelievable gigs, and great vibe around the band. I remember, just as it was coming out, I think our radio plugger, who's since retired from the game, it's no coincidence for this, as he listened to it, he said, I just don't hear any singles on it. And we were kind of like looking at each other going, what? And I was listening to Lila thinking, this guy's clearly having a stroke. You know what I mean? What? How's that not a single? And interestingly, years later, you bump into this kid, Van McCann, from Catfish and the Bottle Tops, whatever they're called, and he's obsessed with that song. And if you listen to on their last album, on the bit of Lila, so you're going to blow me out my mind, because blow me out of my mind sounded didn't work right. He's nicked that line and he's put it in one of his tunes. She comes to blow me out my mind. It's one of the songs I miss. I wish I could sing it live as good as Liam, or I'd have a go at it.
Noel, you mentioned before, Lila, when you were talking, that Gem Archer and Andy Bell also reinvigorated you, rebirthed in a way. Did that continue on to Dig Out Your Soul? How do you regard Dig Out Your Soul? Falling Down, again, you took lead vocal on that. You got the Shock of the Lightning as well.
We went back to him. No, actually, no. We did the one thing that we went back to Abbey Road after being kicked out during the initial sessions of Be Here Now for partying. We were asked to leave. So we went back, and bless them, even though we were all older, it might have been, late 30s, early 40s, bless them, Abbey Road they made us pay the bill up front. We were like, come on, man. And they were going, well, no, you're going to have to pay it up front if you want to use the studio. And we were like, the only thing that's going to be happening here is like crosswords, and maybe, there'd be no early morning drinking. And had a great time in Abbey Road to do that walk every morning, trying to get in the gates, loads of Spanish tourists. Excuse me, thank you. Is to go into that foyer as a Beatles fan is kind of a bit of a trip, and sitting in the canteen and steak and kidney pie and chips for lunch and all that. It's great. It's tinged with a bit of sadness, that album, because it was the end. It was great, and then it kind of turned sour. Even 3 months before that tour, it was highly unlikely we were going to go on the road with that album, and then we did, and then it kind of all fell apart.
Coming up.
And he said, mate, I've got to play Oasis songs to Oasis fans, you know what I mean?
What a life. Noel Gallagher at 50. Radio.
X.
Radio X. What a life. Noel Gallagher at 50.
When you're going back to what you're saying before, do you find it difficult? And I said, I found the whole trip quite easy. Remember the night of the first gig, my bass player who'd been in the Zooton was just chatting in the corridor. It's like 2 minutes to go or something, and he just said, "You're not nervous?" And I was like, it didn't dawn on me. I just said, "I don't think so." And he went, "I'm in it." And I went, "There's only 200 people here in a club in Dublin." And he said, "Mate, I've got to play Oasis songs to Oasis fans, you know what I mean?" And I'm like, "Be all right, don't worry about it. I've been doing it for years." I'd give it a little tiny bit of thought, thinking, well, what will it be like? But rehearsals was worse. When you're rehearsing, that's the worst it's ever going to sound. And if you can get it to sound good in rehearsals, you're laughing after that. Anything sounds good in an empty venue. Everything sounds good at a gig. When we were doing rehearsals, it sounded all right. Singing Don't Look Back in Anger and The Importance of Being Idle and all those songs had given me a head start. So people weren't going, "God, is that what he sounds like?" You know, so they were quite used to me doing that. And I'd always do like 4 or 5 songs in a gig, so I got a bit of a head start that way. But I've got to say, I wasn't nervous at all. Sarah was saying to me that she said, "You don't seem very nervous." I went, "I'm not." She went, "You weirdo." She thinks I'm an idiot. You know, she's like, I just can't believe he's just going to do it. And I was like, what can it be? It can only be terrible. I mean, it's like, I've taken that into, every album that I've ever made. Journalists, it's a standard question, and it was around the time of my solo records. What are you going to do if it's not a success? I thought I'll make another one. I've got enough money. Or what if that's not a success? Well, I'll make another one, and if people, I'll only stop if people don't come to the gigs. If they don't come to the gigs, then what am I going to do after that?
What a life. Noel Gallagher at 50. Radio
X.
And thinking about, the dreams of being a rock and roll star, achieving what you describe as a rock and roll lifestyle as opposed to being a rock and roll star. And obviously, continuing to make music that connects with people and leads to loads of tours and loads of sold out shows in big places. You're 50 now, Noel. But many other things have happened. So, the dreams of being a rock and roll star in the bedroom in Burnage, realising that dream fairly quickly once you got going. But now doing it day in, day out, year in, year out, plus all the pivotal moments in anybody's life, marrying, having children, settling down, becoming responsible. How does that feel now? And marrying the two, being the guitar player, the songwriter, the singer, and being dad and that kind of thing.
It feels good. I've never written a song about my children. Being a dad doesn't come into it for me. People say to me, how do you balance being a dad with being I say, well, I was a rock star long before this pair come along. They're going to have to live with it, I'm afraid. I was a rock star long before I met Sarah. She's going to have to wear it and all, So that doesn't, but you may only struggle with the writing because it wants to hear songs about somebody's comfortable, happy life all the time. Do you know what I mean? So once you get round that, you just focus on the universal truths in life, You can deliver that song in the writing and the singing. You can deliver that song so people know it's real to you, but when they hear it, they know it's about them. And that is magic, and that's something that you can't teach at school. It's something that you stumble upon. It's going back to about Don't Look Back in Anger. It's like, for the life of me, if I could write another song like that, you spend your life doing it. You've got to be into it as a songwriter, and you have to want to be the guy that sits all day to get the one line that marries the verse into the chorus that means something. And then you've got to want to be able to be the guy that gets up and do it on stage. be there for those people that night and trying to hide somewhere the guy that has to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to get to an airport. You can only do it if you want to do it. I love it. I want to be who I am, you know what I mean? The lifestyle's great and all that. You know, it's what the music is, not to sound like one of the Spice Girls here, but it's all about the music, you know.
This is Radio X. I'm John Kennedy, and I'm with Noel Gallagher for What a Life. Noel at 50. I would like to stay with Chasing Yesterday. Yeah, I don't really see you as somebody who's chasing yesterday.
No, I made it up on the spot. One of the girls in the office said, "Have you got a tarp for the record?" And I said, "No." She said, "Well, we need one by 3 o'clock." And then, you know, it got to 5 to 3 and I was hungover and I was just looking through lyrics and Chasing Yesterday popped out. And then at 4:45 I came up with the best title of all time for an album and she said, "It's too late now."
And if you listen to the record, I mean, if you listen to Riverman and Ballad of the Mighty Eye, I mean, you're pushing forward, you're trying new things, you're trying to stretch yourself and keeping yourself interested, which you clearly are. And even now I'm making it. Well, I finished my record now. It's done. It's good news.
It's all done.
When's that coming out now?
It's coming out November the 9th, I've been told. Actually, it just kind of ties in with Chasing Yesterday. As I'd finished the demo stage, I am looking to get a producer. I'd met David Holmes previously at a festival. He was with Primal Scream. He made that Primal Scream album, More Light. And I got all his soundtracks, and I was a fan of his. And they were all in my dressing room, and we were listening to music and drinking, and he said, "We should do some stuff together." And I was like, "Great." So I called him, and he came to London, and he listened to what I'd done so far, and bless him for this. Any other producer would have gone, "Well, it's effectively already done, so what I'll do is I'll just go and tie it up a bit and put my name on it, and that'd be great." He listened to it and he said, "What do you want me to do? You finished it already. It's done. Just put that out." And I was kind of looking at the speakers like you do when you listen to music. And he was saying, "It's brilliant." He said, "I'm not getting involved." I said, "What do you want me to do?" He said, "I'd feel like a bit of a fraud." And he said, "But if you want to make a record, come to my house in Belfast and we'll make a record." So way before Chasing Yesterday was finished, I'd got on a plane and went to Belfast, and I said, "We haven't got any. I've got these songs." And he said, "Don't bring any songs." I said, "Whoa, hang on a minute. I don't go in the studio without songs." And he said, "That's the way we're going to make this record. We're going to write in the studio." The approach that I've had since I was a boy of making music, to put that to one side and to sit in the studio with nothing, and then to be, you know, with like at least 3 or 4 people there going, "Okay, so what are we doing today?" And you're like, "Well, I suppose this is a good chord." Great, right, let's put a drum loop to that, and for it to take shape from nothing, not a single crotchet of music or a word was discussed before I went to Belfast and made the record that's coming out. But as I got into the process of it, I started to love it, and I'm not sure I'll make another record any other way now from now, because it's so exciting. Because even at the mastering stage last Friday, it was changing. Things that I thought weren't going to go on the album are now on the album. And right the last day of mixing, there was, what is this song even become? Do you know what I mean? So to be learning new ways of doing stuff at my age is, it's incredible. And before the people sitting at home listening to this go, you know, I'm well aware that that's how most people work. You know, Paul Weller's been doing that for the last, 200 years, you know what I mean? But it's not the way I work, you know, so it's all new to me, you know. And it's brilliant. And the record, like I say, the record sounds better for it, which I'm sure you'll agree with when you hear it.
I can't wait to hear it.
It is, yeah. It is very good.
So, Noel at 50, live forever?
Will I live forever? Well,
do you want to?
No, I don't. Let's not end it on a sad note, but with events that have taken place in the last few weeks, you really, I look at my beautiful children playing in the back garden sometimes, and I think, what kind of world, what kind of city, what kind of country, what kind of society are you going to live in when you're 50? And you don't think about that until you have children. And I won't be around when they're 50, sadly, you know. But my parents are still around, and I feel kind of guilty I didn't have them earlier now, and thinking, they're not going to have me around. And, the world is getting worse. So no, I don't want to live forever. But the great thing about the business that we're in is that when you're successful at it, you're given a degree of immortality. It's unbelievable. Crazy.
Fantastic, though, to have you here and celebrate your birthday with Radio X. Noel, great to see you. Thanks so much for coming in.
Radio X. What a life. Noel Gallagher at 50.